Hello and welcome along to Leitrim Coaching and Games Wednesday workshops, week number 4. I hope you've enjoyed the workshops so far. Some great contributions from our guests. And tonight our guest will be Martin Fogarty as we turn our attention towards hurling. My name is Darragh Cox. I'm the hurling GPO for Leitrim and Sligo. And Martin is the National Hurling Director and of course a former selector with the all-conquering Kilkenny senior hurling teams under Brian Cody. Martin, no stranger himself to Leitrim, indeed one of the last events that we had organised prior to the change of the circumstances due to COVID-19 was a brilliant workshop that we held with a huge turnout on the Astro pitch in Dromahair with Martin and Damien Coleman from Connacht GAA. Tonight Martin will be talking about the basics of putting together a good session for coaches, for new coaches in particular, and I will return towards the end to talk a little bit about introducing hurling for the first time to new people, to new players, to new schools, and I'll run through a little bit of the program that I use and the guide that I use to try and develop the skills of hurling. That's coming up a little later on, but firstly I'll hand you over to Martin.
Wexford don't have as many back as perhaps they could have. But Tipperary want goals, and Seamus Coleman is in around the back. Is this a number 7? It's a magnificent 7 goals in 7 successive games for Seamus Coleman. Wexford were caught up the field. Tipperary have got their goal.
Yeah, in the last few minutes, Tip coming back into it. Here's Niall O'Mara, long hand pass. Callan had his mind made up, and what a rocket to the corner of the net. We don't see much of that anymore. We see Callan absolutely connected right on the meat, and a brilliant goal. And in fairness to Tipperary in the last 2 or 3 minutes,
the commentator there said we don't see very much of that anymore. Now, much as it pains me to see a Tipperary man putting a ball in the back of the net, well, okay, that wasn't against us, but if you ever needed a reason, folks, to practice ground hurling, there you have it. I mean, what a goal. I've often asked how long it took to score that goal on various courses, and I'd be given answers like 2 seconds, 1 second, half a second, etc. But my answer is always no. It took 10 years. It took 10 years to score that, 10 years of practice on ground hurling. And, you know, when the chance comes, you got to be able to take it. I have some clips, not tonight, of other goals, but I also have clips of people that got the chance and they missed the shot because they hadn't practiced. And I know that Seamus, you know, he's the hurler of the year. And I know for certain that he practices his ground hurling very, very regularly. And I suppose simply, if it's good enough for him, it should be good enough for us. Now, before we get into the real nuts and bolts of tonight, my next slide is a slide that I put up on every course I ever give. And if it's a practical, I refer to it. And I suppose really and truly, I'm going to haunt people with this slide because to me, it is so important. There are certain elements of the game, and if you concentrate on them and focus on them, well, you won't go too far wrong. So folks, I don't mind whether you're training an inter-county senior team or you're training your club under 6s. Those essentials, that's the bread and butter of hurling and camogie, without a shadow of doubt. And the more knowledgeable people that I meet, the more of them are saying the same things. And we got to keep focused in on them. Now, I have 2 little additions to it. They didn't make the top 7, but movement is so important as well. And movement includes twisting and turning, running, jumping, agility, evasion, you know, everything almost to do with fitness. And the other one I put in there is not fouling. Not fouling is a huge skill. I mean, how many teams lose games by 3 or 4 points and look back after and say, look, we gave away 5 or 6 frees that we shouldn't have given away. No, you shouldn't give away any frees, but some ones are just careless. So if you focus in on those essentials, and again, I use the word essentials because people sometimes call them the basics. And I just don't think the word basic does those skills credit enough. They're so important. And they're not easy. They take a lot of work, and you'll see that tonight and probably every night I'll be speaking. We'll be coming back to all of these little by little. So look at coaching. How do you go about it? Now I know you're all probably coaching teams at different age grades, and I hope you get something out of it, because at the end of the day, the game is the game. If it's under 12s or it's inter-county senior, it's the same pitch, more or less, the same rules. The physicality can be different, but the game is the game. So, if you're starting out as a coach or you're at it for a while, you ask yourself, how do I go about it? What should you do? How long should you train for? These are the questions that come up. How many players should I involve in a skill or a drill or whatever? And, that's what we'll try and address here in the next 2 or 3 hours. Okay, it won't be 2 or 3 hours. Normally when I go up to Darragh there in Sligo or Damien, anywhere across Connacht, we're watching the clock and we tell people, lads, we'll try and have you home by 12 o'clock, but you're all home now, so I suppose it doesn't really matter. You can just switch off the computer if you want to anyway. So look at planning your coaching. Does planning make sense? I know people that never plan. They just go ahead and make it up from night to night, and many of them have been successful. So what I'm saying to you tonight is not gospel, it's just suggestions. But I think it does make sense that if you plan a little bit, you're giving yourself a better chance of success. And I would say each night needs to be planned. Maybe plan for a week, plan for a fortnight, plan for a month, and plan for a season. And needless to say, you can change the plan at any stage. So in my own case, I would always have a little scrap of paper in my pocket going to a session. Now this means nothing to you what you're looking at there, but it means a lot to me. Basically, I'm looking at whatever, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I'm looking at 80 minutes there of a session with 10 minutes wastage. And I'm looking at 10 minutes there for a bit of striking. I'm looking at 10 minutes for mobilisation, kind of a little bit of S&C, a little bit of hopping and bounding, whatever needs to be done. Then I'm looking at maybe a specific drill or exercise to tackle maybe a component of the game that maybe my team needs to work on. And then the most important part of the session is an actual game. Now the game there, if you can read it, it could be 10 minutes 5 versus 5, and it could be 30 minutes of a full game. But anyway, the key to it is that you have a little note written down and you know what you're doing when you get to the field. Now I'd always put in an extra bit or two at the back, just in case something is not working out and you have to change it or something, you run out of time. It's always helpful to have a little bit extra there on the back of the sheet. A very important thing, I think, is before you actually go to the field, look at your session, pick up your little bit of paper and ask yourself, how does that session look from a player's perspective? Because sometimes as coaches, we think, this is deadly. I have 6 or 7 drills there, and I have cones here and poles there, and it's deadly. But if you're a player and you look at it, you might say, oh God, there's no game. So if you ask yourself, if I was a player, how would this look? I think you won't go too far wrong either. Again, I'd be suggesting to you, write it down. Again, my desk is full of notes like so. And, many of them are just sessions. And there in the centre, maybe a pitch layout. Because, if you're doing 5 or 6 different things, you want to have an idea in your head where you're going to do it, how is one thing going to flow into the next. And if you have it written down, well, then you're not going to go too far wrong. So again, moving on a little bit further, I actually hope you can't read this because it's dating back a while. But, at some stage, maybe at the start of the year, you're going to broadly plan maybe your whole year. Now, again, you will change it, of course. You might be into your plan maybe 2 weeks and you see something doesn't fit, something needs tweaking, and that's fine. Even on a night, I might go down to the field and I have a plan for the night, and after 10 minutes you say, this is not working, this is not good, and you scrap it and you go to something else. So very, very roughly there, what you're looking at is a kind of an 8-week plan I pulled out, a very basic one. There's no detail in it. And roughly speaking, we were training 3 nights a week over a period of whatever number of weeks. And the little section there in green was that one night was going to be a bit of stamina work. And this was with a senior team and it was early season. The second session then of the week was in blue there, if you can see it, which was going to have a little bit of circuit training and hurling drills. And the third session was going to be hurling or a match. Now again, what you can do will be determined by the facilities you have and the time of the year. And at that time, we didn't have any lights. Well, we still don't have lights. We had a couple of candles, so we couldn't do very much in the night time. And our hurling was limited to the weekend. So you had either your Saturday or a Sunday. Now, within each of those areas, you will have a further plan. For example, if we're working on stamina, strength, fitness, S&C, whatever you call it, over a period of 10 weeks, well, you're going to have a separate plan for that. What exactly are we going to do? If you're working on skill over a period of 10 weeks, what exactly are you going to do? And then the games part of it. Are there going to be in-house games? Are there going to be challenge matches? Whatever. So again, if you set out a broad plan, it's very, very easy then change it. Now, people often ask, how does a single session look? Again, I'd recommend you write it down. So I look at a session here that's, we'll say 80 minutes. Now, normally with adults, I'd have it maybe 90 minutes, but somewhere between 75 and 90 minutes. With underage, if there were minors, I'd still be probably looking at 80 minutes as well, but I mightn't drive them as hard. So the possible detail for one night session. First thing you're going to have to ask yourself, how many players are you expecting? How are you going to organise it? And how long is it going to be? So I have roughly divided this session into two sections, 30 minutes skill development. And that skill development then is divided there, as you can see. Striking and handling is going to be 10 minutes. Rising, whatever you call it, lifting, 5 minutes. Hand passing, 5 minutes. And then maybe hooking for 10 minutes. On a different night, I might do blocking for 10. On a different night, I might do tackling. So that will be my first 30 minutes, give or take. My second 40 minutes then, it's going to be a game. Now, a game can take many, many different forms. You might have small-sided games for 10 minutes. You might do possession for 10 minutes. And then you might play full-sided for 20 minutes. Now, I was looking at this today when I was just preparing a little bit of it, going back over it. And right now, I don't like the look of it. When I look at that, if I was heading to the field tonight, I'd say, right, full-sided game, 20 minutes. And I'm not happy with that. I'd want maybe 30 minutes. So I might scrap the possession or the small-sided game, or I might pull that session from 80 minutes down to 90 minutes. So that's what I mean by when you write it down and look at it, you get a better feel for it. And if you write it down the night before and you look at it a couple of times, you'll really get a better feel for it. So, okay, you have your session sorted. Next thing you got to think out, the layout of the pitch. Are there goals or posts to be set up? Are there cones to be set up? Who's going to do that? Are you responsible for that? Have you help? Are you lucky enough to have a bit of help to do it? Have you a coach that's working with you that can maybe do some of it? Are you going to do a little bit, and while you're doing that, your colleague is setting up for the next little exercise and vice versa? You don't want any time wasting. That's usually important. And you don't want to waste 5 or 10 minutes throwing out a few cones to move on to your next exercise. This actually it's a great way of involving a new coach, or maybe mentoring a new coach that might take over the team the following year for you. That if you involve 2 or 3 people helping you out there, setting up parts of the training, and maybe they're driving them on and you overseeing them. I'm a great believer in, if you have a management team of 3 or 4 people, that everybody gets involved. Obviously one person will take the lead, but the others are driving it on and they're watching the players and they're watching for various things. So on that one there, obviously I have 40 and 30, 70 minutes in an 80-minute session, but you're going to lose 10 minutes somewhere along the line going between exercises or even having breaks. That's going to happen. Looking at the pitch then, it does make sense that you visualize before you go to the session how that session is going to pan out. How is your pitch going to be laid out? I mean, if you're going to have in the game part of your session, if you're going to have 5v5, let's say you have 30 players, well, then you're going to have a third of the pitch. You're going to need goals on the sidelines, and you have 10v10 at one end, 10v10 at the other end, and 10v10 in the centre. Now, if you're going into smaller games, you're going to need more goals. Are you going to use goals? Are you going to use cones? Are you going to use poles? That doesn't really matter, but you need to know how that field is going to look before you hit the field. I have a couple of water bottles in there in the centre because recovery is very, very important. And hydration is very, very important. And if you think about it, if you have a car, and it could be the finest car in the world, but if you don't put petrol or oil into it, it's going to break down. So If you don't allow ample recovery and ample hydration, your players are going to fatigue very, very quickly, and your session is not going to be as it could be. In this day and age, I suppose it makes sense maybe to get the players to bring their own water or whatever they're drinking. It's giving them a little bit of self-responsibility, and it's probably, when we get through this crisis we're in at the moment, it's probably going to be something that's going to be top of the list, that we're not sharing bottles. So personal responsibility is always something that's good to give players. Right. So the next thing then, what are we going to coach? What do we do? We're going to the field, we're going for a week, we're going for a night. What are we going to coach? Well, to me, it's pretty clear. The game of hurling is pretty simple, really. And the game is by far the most important. And if it did nothing, only went down to the field and played a game, a good game, well, to me, that's a good session. And many a team has done nothing else, only play games in training, and they've been very, very successful. Sometimes we overcoach, sometimes we overdrill. Now, having said that, if you don't have the skills, you can't play the game. So if your players can't strike both sides, you got to work on that. Either they work on it in their own time, or you got to work on it during training. So you need the skills to play the game. So we have to learn the skills. And how do you learn those? We learn them by drills. I mean, a drill is, sometimes people are frowning on the word drill, but I don't frown on it. Two players poking a ball to each other is a drill. Poking a ball against the wall is a drill. So, you need the drills to learn the skills. Now, with the skills, again, you get it right first. In particular, if it's a difficult skill. Let's say it's blocking or hooking, very, very complex. Even adult players sometimes don't have it right. So if you get it right first, even in slow motion, then get it faster and faster and faster, and finally get it fast under pressure. And at all times then, being mindful of what age group you're coaching. So, all your coaching should be age appropriate. Are you working the nursery? Are you working the youth? Are you working the adults? So that's hugely important. Now, moving on. Components of the game. If I never coached a hurling team, if I never saw a hurling match, and I was starting with a team next week, and I went to a game, what would I see? Let's say I was like an experienced coach, maybe in some other code, and I go to my first hurling match. Well, obviously, I'm going to see skill. I'm going to see that there are certain skills in this game. I'm going to see fitness. Without fitness, strength, etc., and fitness brings a lot with it. What is fitness? I've just listed a few there: speed, strength, agility, etc. That's part of it. So we got to look at that. And then I suppose a new person will look out and say, right, there's a team, there's 15 players there. How do they work together? Where do they stand? Where do they go? So that's an area. Are there tactics? And then I suppose in every sport, there's the mental side of it. And can we coach it? Can we work on it? Well, we have to. You might have a player that's hugely skillful, but if he goes down 4 or 5 points in a game, he might switch out of the game. Whereas you might have another player that could be down 10 points and they're still going as strong. So these kind of things are all part of the game. Components of the game is just what I'm calling them now. Then you look at the skills of the game. And what are they? How many are there? Well, who knows? Are you just going to go to the field from night to night, or are you going to plan what you're going to do in the skills? Are you going to plan when you're going to do it? So if I throw up here what I might call standard skills, now you've seen those already, Magnificent 7. I think it's pretty reasonable to say that they are pretty well accepted as the main skills of hurling. And are you going to practice them? Are you going to practice them regularly? So let's call those standard skills. However, there are what I might call the not so obvious skills. And I've just fired a few up there on the slide. Pick out a few. Holding your ground. Is that a skill? Certainly is. Reading the game. Is that a skill? Of course it is. When to pull, when not to pull, when to flick a ball. And a few more. Not so obvious skills. Puck outs. Huge skill. Forwards moving or not moving. Backs moving or not moving. Taking on backs. So these are all little bits. Fast delivery. Is that a skill? In my book, it is a skill, when to deliver fast, when not to deliver fast. But if you were out in the backs and you got a ball and you have a quick look up the field and you see a player maybe one-on-one, 50, 60, 70 meters away, to have the ability and to have the vision to land that ball up very, very quickly, that's the huge skill. 2 players going up for the same ball. That's a disaster. So, you know, we could go on and on with this list, but that's just to get you thinking. So, coming back to the session again, what I would suggest is you examine the components of a training session. You know, what exactly happens in a training session. So again, I've just put a little list there of what, in my experience, most training sessions comprise of. There's going to be an element of skills and drills, formals, if you want to call it. There's going to be an element of tactics, analysis. Now, when I'm speaking about a training session, it might be on the field, it might be off the field. But to me, a training session is when you have the players. So if a player only has 3 hours a week to give you, or 4 hours or whatever, you got to use that time to the best advantage of your team. So, as I said, tactics analysis, that might be done off the field. Talking. We do a lot of talking. You're listening to someone doing a lot of it now. Some coaches talk too much on the pitch. Again, you're looking at one of them. Well, you're not. You're listening to them. Psychology, speakers. Some people are into it. Some people are not. S&C, which used to be known as fitness. It's a huge element of training. And again, it could be separate, off running somewhere. It could be in the gym. But again, it eats into the time that a player can give you in training. There are what's known as condition games, which are, I suppose, set pieces that you're working on some part of your game that needs to be worked on. And then there's their formal game, the formal match that we all understand, whether it's 15 aside or 10 aside, depending on the numbers you have. So, you know, it's up to you to decide what makes up a session and what are the priorities. But I would strongly suggest that you plan them accordingly. Now, I put a little task to a few friends of mine a couple of months back. They were looking after a senior adult team, okay. And I was chatting to them about, you know, what exactly they do in training. And I gave them this sheet and it says, lads, look at, will you fill this out for me for 10 hours of training, which was broadly speaking a fortnight's training. And we're looking at a session being maybe an hour and a half. So I asked them to just write out in time. I didn't need detail of how long they are spending on the different components. So let's say Monday night, how long are you spending on skills and drills? How long on fitness? How long on tactics? How long on psychology? How long on condition games? How long on match? And after all the sessions were put together and we totted up the time, I said to the lads, right, are you actually doing what you set out to do? You know, do you ever look back after a week or a month and say, whatever you think is most important, is that being done most? Is that being given most time? You know, does the training reflect your priorities? And some people don't know that because they maybe don't look back. They might look forward, but they don't look back. So what's coming up next here now is definitely not something I'm asking you to do, but it's something that might just trigger your mind, start thinking a little bit more. So I took that information that the 3 friends gave me and I put it into a little chart. So basically, we drew the pie chart to reflect the components of the training sessions that the lads had put together. And if I look at it there, it stands out on mine. Now I can't use the mouse here because my mouse will roll over one place and it'll look different on your chart. So, well, maybe I'll try, but I'm rolling over the green area here, but I think the mouse that you're seeing is probably rolling over somewhere else. So when I look at that chart straight away, I see a massive amount of time given to S&C or fitness, 40%. I look at a small amount of time, 15% given to match game. Now, am I happy with that? Well, it depends. It depends on the time of the year to me. If that chart was reflecting the 8-week grid or the 8-week plan that I showed you earlier, I'd be quite happy because that 8-week plan was early season. We didn't have lights and our players mightn't have been that fit. So the focus was to get them fit. So to see the major part of the pie there given over to fitness, I'm quite happy with that. Now, we'll chalk out another one here. So we changed around just the time, again, just to throw up a different chart to you. And when I look at this one, I see fitness at 25%. I see drills at 27%. So I see a match just at 8% in red. And I see condition games in orange there at 35%. I see no psychology and I see very little tactics at 5%. And I ask myself, am I happy with that? Again, depends on the time of the year. But really, I wouldn't be happy with that, I think, at any time of the year, because we have condition games and we have skills. That's plenty of hurling, but very little match time. And at the end of the day, it's all about the game. Like the competitions that we train for are actually matches. They're not condition games. They're not skill competitions. They're matches, which are generally 15 aside. Okay, there could be 11 aside. And you learn the game by playing the game. So I wouldn't be really happy with that chart. I throw this one up and I have a look at it, and what hits me straight in the face is the red area, which is saying match 25%. So 25% of the time that I am given to training is being given over to a match, a formal match. That makes me happy. Then I look at almost another 25% given over to condition games, which are segments of a match. And I look at 20% given over to skills, drills, call them what you like. So from a hurling perspective, I'm very happy with that, especially if it's in the season and you're coming up to your games. Now, I look at a green section there, S&C fitness, just 10%. And you could say, hold on, that's, the guys are going to lose fitness. Not at all. When you get into your hurling season, I always think fitness is hugely important, but I would build my fitness into skills, into drills, into condition games. And if you wonder what am I talking about, if you want to get hurling and fitness at the same time, well, if you put one player standing in the goals, small goals can be made out of cones, and you put two players out the field, and you puck the ball out to them, and you let them hold for a minute, 1v1, well, that'll kill you. That's as tough a training as it can get. And after that minute, swap the goalie, and after another minute, swap the goalie. So you're getting your fitness in there, and you're also getting your hurling. So you never lose sight of the fitness element, but you build it into your training. So I would have, I suppose, a session. I would have maybe a workshop, which would be fitness elements, how to build your fitness into your hurling. Okay. So anyway, that's looking at that chart in that way. And again, depends what you think is important. I'm just saying to you that what shows up on that chart should reflect what you want. Okay, I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you. Now, skills then, the skills part of training. You say to yourself, right, what are we going to do in skills? Okay, we have our components sorted out. We know how long we're going to give to the various things, but one of the biggest elements of the training, in my view, is skills. Have you ordered and prioritized the skills? Do you know what you're going to do, or are you just hitting and missing? Are you going to look back after a month's training and discover we haven't done any hooking, we haven't done any blocking, right? We haven't done any ground hurling. And then maybe you lose a game by a couple of points because your players couldn't hook or they couldn't block, or a couple of your players had a chance to score a goal or maybe clear a ball with a ground strike and you haven't done it. So, is it going to be haphazard, or are you really, really going to look into your sessions, look into your skill sessions and see, are we covering everything? Now, you actually can't cover everything. You will never have enough time to do everything you want in training. So again, you got to prioritize. And I'm a firm believer in, if you bring players to the field too often, they lose appetite. So even though in your head there's 1,000 things you want to do, there's 100 things you want to do every night, you can't do them because the players lose freshness. So you got to keep prioritizing. So what I'm throwing up to you here is a little snippet of the skills element of your training. If you look at all your skills, we looked at the Magnificent Seven, but each of those can be further expanded into so many more skills. If we look at striking alone, there's striking right and left, the striking from your hand, the striking from the ground, the striking for distance, then the striking for accuracy. It's one thing to be able to puck a ball 70 meters, but can you puck it 70 meters to travel in between two poles 5 or 10 meters apart? The striking when you're on the run, the striking when your colleague is on the run, and that is not easy. So, it's one thing, as I said, to be able to strike a ball 70 meters, but can I hit a ball 70 meters running at full speed to a player that's also running at full speed? So that's just honing in on striking. Are we covering all those aspects over our period of training? I can go on down through more of them. Even the slide is not big enough to take all the skills and the various aspects of the skills, but I hope you're getting the point. So again, I would challenge you to not necessarily on paper, but definitely in your mind to look at the skill element of your sessions and see how are you spending that time. Again, prioritize. Are there skills that just must be done every night? And to me, there are. Striking just has to be done every night, in my view. Raising the ball has to be done every night. You know, that's up to yourself. Certain things, okay, I wouldn't do hooking every night. I wouldn't do blocking every night. Touch every single night. Every single night, I would do it. To draw a graph like this is impossible because so many of the skills overlap each other, which is good. I mean, if we're striking, we're catching. Well, we hope we're catching because we could be dropping. And there is the reason why we must work on it. So generally they go on twos, but you get my point that you're making certain that there isn't a gap. And again, in a club, you know, as your players move up through the ranks, there should be communication between coaches. You know, I don't like using the word should, but I'll use it. They should be doing maybe skills testing, either formally or informally by observing. And coach to coach should be able to say, right, there's 5 or 6 guys there passing from 16s to minors. They're weak on a particular side. So that should get a bit of focus. You know, you should know, can your players do the jab lift at speed? Can they do the roll lift running away from a ball? So if they can't, that should be factored in. It should be maybe recorded in your club as the players pass from coach to coach. So again, I hope you know what I mean there. Now, what you can do, as I said, I wouldn't in the slightest expect you to be logging all this stuff on a computer and doing graphs up. But what can be done very, very simply, if you want to, I'm just checking the clock here, and I just noticed I forgot to let it go. So I have no idea how long I'm working here, but it will just keep going. Damien will probably cut in on me after a while and say, Martin, he'll cough her once or twice, and that'll mean there's only 2 hours left. Anyway, to record what you're doing, let's say it's the components of the game. If you get a simple sum copy or a maths copy and you write out your components, and let's say every little square is 10 minutes. So if you spend 30 minutes on something there, you fill in 3 little blocks. And, you know, so if I look at my top one there, I don't know if I'm pointing to it, I see after whatever, 2 months or a month, skills and drills, yellow. That's what I spend most time on. Tactics, not much. Fitness, green area, fair bit. I look back at my match, not a lot. So am I happy with that? Very, very easy. 5 minutes after a session, we'll do that on an all match copy. A handier little one maybe is the one below, where we make little boxes, and each box is 6 squares. Each square is 10 minutes. So when you have a box completed, it's an hour. So you come back after a month, and you have a quick look at your maths copy, and you see, right, skills, I've given almost 4 hours to it. Tactics, I've given whatever, an hour and a half, and you see then how you're moving along. So as I said, I don't expect you to fill the like of that out, but you should have some idea, I think, in your own mind. So anyway, that brings us to, I suppose the best part in any course, which is the tea time. And I firmly believe that every course, you know, when you stop for tea, that's when the real learning happens. You chat your colleagues, maybe you chat your enemies, you chat your rivals, but you swap phone numbers, you arrange challenge matches, you maybe share a few tactics, and it's a real good time. So I suppose we can't really have the tea here now tonight, even though we're trying to pretend that this is real, and we can just have I suppose a virtual cup of tea. But Darragh and Damien, I just brought along a few bits here because usually when I go up to Connacht there, up around Sligo, the boys are all spoiling me there. There I have an eclair there for you, and I have one for Damien. And I just had a little cup of tea here myself. So we'll move on now to the next part. Normally we'll say, right lads, we'll give you 10 minutes there and we'll see you down the pitch and bring your hurls. So we're moving in now to the practical element of tonight. And again, I'm a firm believer that if you hone in on these tactics, on these skills, and you work on them, you will not be going too far wrong. And what you're going to see is relevant for under 12s, as relevant for inter-county seniors. At this point in time, I'd like to acknowledge the thanks of my good friends Brian Ryan and Kilkenny and PJ Ryan and Sean Kelly, who are coaches down there, for helping out with getting all these drills together. And John Harrington, who works with me in Crow Park, John did all the camera work and spent hours and hours and hours sorting out these videos. And I suppose the only thing I could say against John is Tipperary, man. And we let him into Nolan Park before the All-Ireland last year to do this bit of video, and I'm not so sure whether he left something behind or took something away, but it possibly cost us the All-Ireland. But anyway, all joking apart, a lot of work was put into this by John. We didn't practice the drills in advance. The players you're going looking at are Kilkenny under 15s, and we left in the mistakes on purpose just to show that these guys are pretty decent hurlers. However, like everybody, they make mistakes, and there's no point in having drills and skills that are perfect. And I hope when you watch and look in here that you'll notice, balls being dropped. If you drop a ball in a drill, it's no big deal. If you drop a ball in a match, it can cost you a game. And so if you hone in on them and see how you might use them. Now, in the current climate, in the situation we find ourselves in now, we're hoping that, well, it will happen at some time that we have a get back to play, which is probably going to be progressive. Like injury, you take a graded return. So when a player is injured, they take a graded return to play. For our games to get up and running again, I'm presuming it'll be a graded return. Everything we're showing you here tonight, I think, would be ideal for that graded return, because I think all of these skills we're going to show you can be done with less than 8 players. Some of them, many of them, can be done with 2, and distances are going to be as long as you want them to be. So might be no harm to hone in on them and see what you think. So we'll just run this little one now. I just want to cut myself out of it at the start. Okay, I'm voicing over these folks, so you might need to turn up your sound a little bit more. So just sit back now and we'll see what we got here for a few minutes.
Indeed, every aspect of raising the ball is hugely important and should be practiced continually. Two-handed lifts, one-handed lift, the jab lift, the roll lift, a moving ball, a stationary ball. Rising with the heel of the hurl, as some of these players are doing, is not ideal and can be very costly. Sometimes a player will miss the ball, so it's very good practice to coach them in retrieving and coming back. That when they miss the ball, they'll run back, pick it and go again. Hand passing at various distances, even up to 30 or 40 metres, both stationary and on the move, is an essential skill and is often neglected. Proper technique is important. Some of the players here are actually throwing the ball, or at least will be blown for throwing, and should change their technique. Here the players are striking, various striking high ball, striking low ball, striking to the hand or striking to the feet. Again, it's an essential skill, and players should continually work off both sides and vary the distance. Running towards the ball, whoever's coming to meet the ball, working on your touch, again is an essential skill. This is a variation on rising, striking and hand passing. Players are also working on movement and evasion. Exercises like this can be ideal for warm-up, but again, every training session should probably have an element of rising and catching. Lines of 4 hurling on the ground is one of the oldest drills in the book and is hugely beneficial. It is excellent for coordination, sharpness, getting your eye in, and even for fitness. The end players control and strike the ball as quickly as possible, whereas the middle players move towards the ball and keep the ball moving. You can then move along to striking from the hand, again where players move from side to side, and you can even mix both skills where the first player pulls on the ground and the second player lifts it, carries it and strikes. And it can also be transferred into a shooting drill, as the players are doing here. Player 1 strikes the player 2, player 2 feeds player 3, and player 3 strikes for a point. Striking is one of the key skills of the game, and there are so many different types of strike that you just probably need to work on some element of it in every training session. So here we have the players striking right and left at various distances and various types of striking. Striking to the hand, striking to the feet, hopping the ball on the ground. You can just build it up over a period of time that they're getting experience at all levels of striking. Moving towards the ball, stepping to the side before they strike the ball are also little skills that should be built into your training. So here we have the players moving towards the ball as they would in a game, because if they don't, their opponent is going to get the ball before them. Players are now working on long striking. And this is an essential skill also, that you strike a ball as far as you can, and built into that is catching. So players are working on striking as far as they can, getting a good position, catching the ball and returning it. This is a variation on long striking, where two players are working together. One catches the ball and hand passes to his partner, and his partner then drives it as far as he can down the field. It works on teamwork, it works on vision, it works on laying a ball off to your teammate when you're under pressure yourself. Again, I would like these players to be striking longer. Players in this exercise are attempting to run at maximum speed, collect a ball that is moving to them at pace, and without breaking stride, deliver the ball back down to the far end of the field. It's extremely difficult. It's one little error and the drill will break down. In a game, if a player doesn't go at top speed to the ball, his opponent will get there before him. If his touch lets him down, his opponent will win the ball, and if he slows down to strike, his opponent will hook him. Here we have players hand passing a ball at a close distance, but they're moving around the field. This replicates a game, and the distance should be increased over a period of time. Players here are moving around the field, striking the ball to each other. Ideally, one player makes a breakaway, looks for the ball, and his colleague tries to strike the ball straight into his hand. Players initially start reasonably close, but as time moves on, they get further and further and further away, so that eventually they're possibly striking 50, 60 and 70 metres accurately. A variation on striking in trees can be, instead of striking to the hand, you strike low on the ground into a player's pat. Again, replicate maybe a forward moving onto a ball and picking it up at pace. Before hooking and blocking, players must have a good control and use of their hurl and also footwork. A hurl that is not too heavy and not too short will produce best results. So this little exercise works on handling a hurl, works on a little bit of movement, and is an introduction to hooking and blocking. Hooking itself is best practiced initially without a ball, even in slow motion, to develop good technique. Using one hand produces the best results. Even adult players might never have practiced hooking, so they might try this. Some of these skills are as relevant for an adult as for an under 5 player. Blocking is all about keeping your eye on the ball and having good control of your hurl. Start slowly, with the striker making it easy for the blocker initially, and then making it harder as technique improves. Coaches can come up with their own exercises to practice these techniques. Using a soft ball initially is often good practice, as the fear of getting hit with a leather ball can sometimes cause a player to turn away from the slitter instead of keeping their eye on it. This is a very difficult exercise that works on striking, catching, hand passing, support, and timing the run. Ideally, the players are moving at maximum speed to replicate a game. However, it is not as easy as one might think, and the slightest mistake will result in the drill breaking down. In a game, that generally amounts to losing possession or missing a scoring opportunity. 7 players is the ideal number for this exercise. It will not be suitable for players that haven't mastered the art of striking, catching, handling the ball. So you can see from this exercise that depending on the level of ability your players have, whether you decide to do it or not. There are some variations into the same exercise, initially running straight down the field. Then a variety can be the attacking players run diagonally across in front of the player with the slitter. Again, trying to replicate situations that might arise in a game. The player in the centre can knock down the ball, and on this occasion the players are working on getting in for a break, raising the ball, continuing on, and maybe even taking a score. If you have 14 players, ideally you'd set up 2 grids. If you have 21 players, you set up 3 grids, so that players are getting plenty of activity and not standing around too much. This is a nice little exercise for sharpening up players, particularly in the lead up to maybe a big game. Players are working on short striking with both sides. They're working on handling, laying off the ball and touch. They're also working on interval running, that is, changing pace as they show for a pass, which is a very good form of physical training. The idea is to strike to the blue cones and then run diagonally to the red to receive a pass. So in a game, when you're looking for a pass, you don't run up to the player with the ball, you run out to the side of him. There are variations in this exercise also. Initially, players can strike to the hand, then they can strike to the feet, and then they can also hand pass. So it's up to coaches again to vary the drills to suit their own needs, to suit the standard of their players. Here is another exercise that again works on striking, handling the ball, timing the run and looking for a layoff at maximum pace. Again, it is not easy, because if there is a deficiency in any of the skills involved, the drill will break down. What we're looking for here is first player strikes long, the second player times his run and comes at maximum speed to take a layoff, and would then continue on maybe towards the goals to take a shot. If a player runs too early in a game, he's going to bring an opponent with him, and it is pointless. If the player's striking ability is not up to the standard, they just can't do this drill. If their handling ability is not up to the standard, they can't do it either. So you've got to gauge the standard of your players when using this exercise.
A huge thank you to Martin Fogarty, the National Hurling Director, for that presentation. That was part of a longer presentation myself and Martin and Damien Coleman, the Connacht Hurling Director, were involved in recently as part of the GAA's Hurling webinar series. Martin touching on a lot of the, well, what we term the basics, but what he probably better terms the essentials there, and how they apply to every age grade, from beginners and novices in nursery right up to adult senior inter-county. They never change those essentials and need to be practiced at every session. I'm just going to focus a little bit more now on how that will work in a nursery program within a club, or how I would operate it when visiting schools right across the county during my day-to-day job, and when the schools do get back up and running. Of course, we've covered a huge amount of schools already as part of the Hurling into Schools program across Connacht GAA and Leitrim, and it's normally a 6-week program, can last from 6 to 8 weeks in some cases, but I have a guideline of 6 weeks that I work from, that enables me to kind of keep on track and make sure all of those essentials are covered in a phased basis, particularly for young boys and girls that are brand new to the sport of hurling or camogie. Week 1 for me would often be just a brief introduction to hurling and camogie, just talking about the sports, asking if any of the kids have any experience with it, and if they do, getting 1 or 2 of those kids that might be involved in clubs to point out some of the basics for them, introducing the equipment, of course, the hurl, the helmet, putting on the helmet correctly is a huge thing, especially for kids. The best job I find is to get them doing it themselves as soon as possible, because it can be quite time consuming trying to put on a number of helmets at the start of a session. The sliotar as well, of course, hugely important, and using the right sliotar. The softer sliotars are a tennis ball, particularly for younger kids, so that they don't develop any sort of fear of a hard ball coming at them. Of course, establishing the hurling hand, probably one of the most important things you can do. Most kids will take the hurl naturally in their strong hand, their writing hand, but the problems arise when they go to put their second hand on it, and often they'll put their weaker hand on top of the hurl, hoping to balance the hurl a bit better with their stronger hand underneath it. The habit we need to get them into is keeping that strong hurling hand on top of the hurl. How I do that is by asking them for their writing hand, or another little trick is asking them to show me their snowball hand, getting them to roll together a snowball and pretend they're about to throw it at me. Every child will inevitably do that with their stronger hand, so once they have the hand in the air ready to throw the snowball, you're pointing it out to them that that's their hurling hand, and that's the hand they need to keep up at the top of the hurl. Obviously, if that's their hurling hand, their other hand, which would be their weaker hand, though we don't use that word, being their catching hand, and rather than using strong or weak hands or writing hands or snowball hands going forward, I'll refer to the hurling hands and catching hands. And every time we start a session, I'll ask the kids to identify for me their hurling hand and their catching hand, and we'll try to monitor that as best we can. After that, and this is where the hurler that has a little bit of experience comes in, we get into the ready, lock and strike positions. Ready, I ask the kids to demonstrate how a goalkeeper stands in hurling. It's always the best example, I think, with the goalkeeper standing in that ready position with their catching hand down near where the tape normally would be on a hurl, and their strong hand, their hurling hand, up at the top of the hurl where it stands. That catching hand slides up then for the lock position, so the hands are touching. The key thing, of course, being that the hands are touching, so that enables them to strike left and right using their wrists rather than their shoulders. We'll go in there from there, into the ground strike, getting the ball on the ground and getting them to hit that ball as soon as they're comfortable striking left and right. And the opposite to that, of course, is the ground block, where we have players passing the ball to each other, one striking it and one blocking it with their hurl. Things we're watching for: their head, hands and feet, always what we're looking at. The head, eyes on the ball, and the hands locked together on the hurl when they're striking, separated when they're in the ready position. And the feet, well, we're looking for them to move their feet. We're looking for them to keep their opposite foot up beside the ball when they're striking. So if they strike in the right hand side, we want to see that left foot up close to the ball, and ditto the opposite side if they're striking on their left hand side, is seeing that right foot move forward. Week 2, then we try to get them into games as quickly as possible, and by week 2 we're able to hopefully get into some sort of mini games. This can of course be done in week 1 of a nursery program if you have enough time on your hands, but obviously it's all modified mini games, and we're practicing what we learned the week before, which is our striking and blocking on the ground. So the games will be the ball on the ground, no lifting it, just pulling left and right on the ground in small sided games. Hurling and camogie, it does help sometimes to separate the boys and the girls, especially if some of the children are a little bit shy or a little bit more tentative than others. Some of the girls might like to play in their own game. Often you'll find that girls want to get stuck in, however, with the boys in the underage games, and definitely you'll see the quality in some of the young girls is every bit as good as some of the young boys, so it makes sense for them to be mixed up as well. I think it benefits both. Obviously you try, and with those small sided games, to have players relatively playing at their own level, their own competitiveness. So if that means separating teams up or separating players, or putting slightly stronger players in one match and slightly weaker players in a second match, just so they're able to learn at their own level, then all the better for us. Loads of games of course you can introduce here, including Bomb the House, an old favourite, where you get as many slitters or tennis balls or softballs as you can. Set up 2 teams either side of a halfway line and let them hit the ball over and back to from that line into the other team's house. The idea obviously to get as many slitters and balls into the opponent's house by the time the whistle goes. A great game because it encourages them just to go and hit the ball. There's no tackling involved, which can be a bit off-putting for younger kids in particular, and there's a lot of fun involved, and they work quite hard, and they're forced to hit left and right as well if they want to play the game well. So all that time you're going around spotting and fixing, you're just checking to make sure that that hurling hand stays on top of the hurl, and that the hands aren't swapping when the player is swapping sides. So if they're hitting the ball on their left but they're right-handed, that right hand stays on top, and that even whether they're hitting it left or right, that they keep that hurling hand on top of the hurl and keep the hands locked together when they're hitting the ball. Week 3 then, and we're working on our agility, balance and coordination. Hugely important. The fundamental movement skills for young kids. Could be done with hurls or without hurls, but needs to be done at every session. Animal walks and little exercises like that. Little games of tag, chasing, all that sort of stuff. Great just to improve and work on agility, balance and coordination. The ABCs of coaching, how it applies to a hurling or camogie session. Of course you need that agility, balance and coordination if you're to roll, lift and jab lift the ball when we progress it on to getting that ball into our hand. It helps strengthen our wrists as well, of course, and there's a couple of games that we can do to help in that regard. Gone fencing is a game, I call it gone fencing, where basically you have 1v1 and they're tapping each other's hurl, holding the hurl up, so they might hold it low down around by their knees. They might have it in front of them around, between chest and belly high, and even up high above their heads. Just tapping the hurl left and right of each other in a fencing position is good for strengthening the wrists. Again, encouraging them to use or to keep their strong hand at the top of the hurl, their hurling hand at the top throughout. And a good game. They have a lot of fun doing it, going forward and backward, moving forward and backward. So one person would move in for 3 taps of the hurl, and then they'd reverse as their opponent comes at them. Of course, all done in a fun type style. There's anyone that's swinging the hurl a bit mad needs to be reined in a bit, but it's a good one for strengthening those wrists. Another one for good one for strengthening the wrists is to put a load of cones, just your ordinary training cones, in a circle, and set up a couple of teams, maybe 4 teams at 4 corners of a square surrounding the circle. Put all the cones in the middle, and then ask them to turn the hurl upside down, so they're holding the hurl by the boss, and they're using the top of the hurl to fish those cones up. So they're putting them into the circle, they're turning their wrists so they can lift that cone and bringing it back to their team. And the first team to get, or once all the cones are gone, the team that has the most cones wins. And a lot of fun to be had with this one as well. The great thing about it is it's encouraging them to strengthen their wrists, and it's encouraging them to use their wrists and turn their wrists. So when they put that top of the hurl into the cone, they need to turn their wrists so they're able to flick it up and bring that cone with them without it falling off the hurl. They're not allowed to touch the cones, obviously, with their hands. Another good game that can be played. All help, of course, towards strengthening those wrists and help with their balance and their coordination and indeed their agility too, as they need to get down and work those cones onto the hurl. In terms of hand-eye coordination, then we're getting into our basic throwing and catching, where any way you could do it, you can have them with their hurl in their hand, just using their catching hand. Might be better starting off to let them throw and catch with 2 hands, because it just gets them into that habit of basic throwing and catching, and the hand-eye coordination to be able to get that ball into their hand and safeguard it into their chest, same as they would do in Gaelic football, of course. Another good one for the throwing and catching that we use is for the slightly larger cones, like the mini traffic cones, I suppose you described them as, and you can use bean bags, tennis balls, light slitters for this, anything you want really, and whereby one person is holding the cone, one person is throwing, and their teammate is to catch the ball in the cone. It takes away that fear a little bit of catching the ball initially. Some kids can be a bit I suppose wary of, a little bit scared of the bean bags or the ball coming at them too fast, and at least with the cone takes the impact of the catch. And again, it's just basic hand-eye coordination you're working on there. Obviously, if they get a bit better and a bit more comfortable with it, you're working it into using their catching hand only, and holding their hurl, or holding anything in their hurling hand, even if it's just a pen or a marker or a stick or anything at all, just to keep that hand occupied. So you're encouraging them to catch in their catching hand all the time. If they can carry the hurl with them, all the better. And then as you progress that on, they're going to be protecting their hand when they're catching it with the hurl behind it. They're going to be hand passing it rather than just throwing it to each other. Anyways, that you can progress that game on, but again, it's just working on that hand-eye coordination. Week 4, we're into the skills of the game, and there's any amount of them. You could be doing a 6-week program on the skills alone, but there's a couple that the kids do enjoy. Identifying the different ways you can solo the ball and hurling. The bounce solo obviously is one the kids love, because it's a challenge for them to keep that ball bouncing on their hurl. They probably find that easier than the balance solo. The balance solo obviously is where you just put the ball on the hurl and keep it balanced as you move about. Great to start the balance one with a bean bag, because it's going to sit on the hurl, but they still have to hold the hurl properly. They still need to work on their balance and their own skills, in terms of if you set up a game where they have bean bags on their hurls and get them passing in and out between each other, or passing in and out between cones, it means that they have to focus on their own coordination and balance, while obviously balancing the beanbag. Once they're able to do it competently, get the slitter, the light sliotar or tennis ball onto the hurl, and off they go with the balance solo. The strike then, of course, is once you've kind of mastered the roll lift and the jab lift from the week before, working on your coordination, you can get them striking the ball out of their hands. It's always one that you just need to be wary of when you've hurls flying around, and you just want to, the safety becomes a huge thing obviously with the strike, and you might be a little bit restricted in terms of the space that you have, but the sooner you can get them hitting the ball, the better, out of their hands, left, right side, left side, and just showing them how to do that and letting them off, because once they do it, once they try in some way master that, the child will just want to do it all the time. The other one you can do is the bat, of course, where they're holding the hurl above their head with their thumbs on the hurl, with the hands not quite locked, slightly separate, and you're throwing the ball up above their head and asking them to bash it back to you. A very important skill to master, and probably one that we don't practice enough, right up to adult level. The drop shot again is one that's again just helps in developing those skills of the game, develops our coordination, helps our hand-eye coordination, where you're actually dropping the ball onto the ground and hitting it on the bounce. It's a huge weapon to have in the armoury for when the game starts, particularly when you're close to goals. We all have examples of inter-county hurlers scoring goals with a drop shot when it looked like they were about to be hooked maybe, or when the space was tight for them, and you can get great power off that drop shot. But again, it's one we don't really practice enough, but a good skill for youngsters to develop, particularly if they're striking the ball well out of their hands. It's an added little challenge for them. And then you can introduce a bit of hooking and blocking as well. Again, safety paramount here. You're just basically asking them to go through the motions of hooking and blocking without really going too deep into it. So you're asking one player to lightly, or maybe you're doing it yourself where you're lightly swinging, and the defender is going to get down in front, get the hurl out well in front of them, get down low onto the ground on one knee, and get that block in front of to block the opponent's hurl. And equally so with hooking, where you can work them in twos, where one person just takes off at a slow run in front, and their opponent runs behind them, keeps that hurl good and long outstretched, and just hooks that slow swing back from their opponent as they're running. Obviously, the better the hurlers you have, and the more experienced the hurlers you have, you can get them doing this with a sliotar and get into competitive, a more competitive type drill. But initially it's just that slow swing, just to get them used to that clash of the ash, that the effect of hurl against hurl, that might take a little bit of getting used to, particularly for younger kids. On to week 5 we go, and we're talking about teamwork at this stage. Again, we're back into games. A lot of what we do is game based, and we're working on our small sided games, 4v4, 5v5, 6v6, as many small games as you can have that everyone is involved, everyone is playing all the time, setting up 3 or 4 different pitches if necessary. That's the game side of it. You can, of course, modify those games as much as you want, whereby they could be purely hitting the ball on the ground, or you could be allowing them to pick it up and strike it with no soloing, or you could be allowing them to pick it up and hit it without taking it in their hands. Anyways, you can modify a small-sided game. Again, just depending on what skills you're trying to promote and what level the kids are at. There's passing and catching games similar to what we were doing with our hand-eye coordination, where you can have them working in twos, throwing and catching. Again, at this stage, we're hoping to do everything with the hurl in our hand, but it's focusing on using the catching hand only for catching, and rather than swapping the hurl over to our catching hand and catching it in our stronger hurling hand, we're catching everything in that catching hand. And that doesn't just apply to a ball that's in the air. Obviously, when we're roll lifting and jab lifting, everything is going into that catching hand. So the importance of developing good hand-eye coordination and strengthening that catching hand, hugely important. The fun games, of course, again, when you're trying to promote teamwork, any games that you can do that involves them working together is going to be beneficial, whether they're related to hurling or not. I mentioned tag earlier on, bulldog, any sort of games like that where players have to work together to try and win the game, even to games like capture the flag or any of those playground friendly games. Or tails, where you're putting bibs at the back of your shorts, and you're working maybe 2-3 chasers working together to try and get the tails off the other player. They're all excellent. They're all excellent in promoting teamwork, even if they're not essentially hurling related. They're great games that can play, and the kids have a huge amount of fun with them. In terms of support play, then that's where you could alter the exercises you have them doing a little bit. Maybe you have, rather than having 1 versus 1 and throwing and catching, that you've 2 versus 2, facing 2 I should say, rather than versus 2, and one person is catching the ball and laying it off to a support player off their left or right shoulder, or standing close to them before it goes back to to the opposite 2. So that works particularly well obviously when you're striking. So you have one player striking it to a first player who offloads it to his own teammate to strike back to the opposite side. The opposite 2 is again, and it's just working in 2s, working in 3s, working in 4s, and all the time. Promoting teamwork. And stations is the other option. Then stations work particularly well in nurseries or for younger kids, whereby you might have a hand passing station, you might have a striking station, you may have a soloing station, you may have a station that's promoting throwing and catching. Any amount of, you could easily set up 7 or 8 stations with a different challenge in each one. So that might be knocking the cones with a ground strike at one station, it might be hitting a target on a wall at another station, striking out of the hand. The solo one, you could be setting up a line of cones and asking them to run through them and balance the ball on their hurl, or the ground control, whereby you're setting up them cones and you're asking them to dribble the ball with their hands locked together and along the ground, in and out between those cones. And you set challenges and you get them working together at each station, so that there's a certain amount of points for each time they complete it, or every cone they knock, or every time they hit the target, whatever it may be, and let them add up their scores as they go along. And once everyone has done every station, then they can tot up their own scores as a team and see how well they got on. Again, it's just encouraging them, while learning the skills, to also learn that little bit of teamwork. Week 6 then, hugely important. Games. Get them playing the game. Get them into games. We've been doing it all along anyway, with the small-sided games, the mini games, modified games. What I mean by that is modified rules. So we talked about that a little bit earlier on, whereby you could have them just using the ball, or not allowed to lift the ball up off the ground. So it's ground striking only, where they can pick it up and solo it, but they can't take it in their hand. They have to hit it off the hurl. The opposite of that, of course, they can't take it in their hand, but they're not allowed solo it, or that they have to get a certain amount of passes in before they're allowed to score, or they're only allowed to score goals, or they're only allowed to score points with no goalkeeper. Any amount of ways you can modify games. The stepper process, always very, very useful to have in mind. This goes back to our coach education modules, the foundation and level 1 awards, the stepper process: space, time, equipment, people or players, and the rules at the end there, the or at the end. So space, you're talking about the space for a game. So do you make it smaller to try and encourage working in smaller confined areas and having a lot of close contact, or do you make it bigger to try and promote a bit longer striking or a little bit more running? The time principle, do you put a clock on it? Do you give them as much time as they want? Do you set them a certain challenge to score within a certain time? How is that going to work? Can it be modified using time to make that game a little bit more interesting, or to make that game a little bit more challenging, more importantly? Equipment wise, again, we're talking here about the goals. We mentioned maybe only scoring points, or maybe putting cones up instead of a goal at one end, and instead of trying to score a goal or a point, what you're actually trying to do is knock your opponent's cones. That's where equipment can come into it. Personnel, players, that's down to your basic playing numbers there. Do you want a 3-a-side game where everyone is getting loads of touches of the ball, or do you want a more competitive 7-a-side game where there's a lot more variables happening there, lots of different standards happening on each team, and you have to work as a team. You can go up to whatever you want, 9-a-side, 10-a-side, 11-a-side if necessary, but again, it's what you're looking for from the session. So if you're looking to promote ground striking, but you're on a pitch and the ball isn't moving well because we haven't really mastered good connections with our ground striking yet, and you have an 11-a-side game, well, the reality is that ball isn't going to move too far. It's going to get stuck in rucks all the time. So would you be better off there with a 3 or 4-a-side game, and at least that way there might be a little bit more space to get that ball moving, and there's more chance of everyone getting a touch of that ball. So rather than doing an 11 or 12-a-side game involving 24 players, you could take them 24 players and make 4 3-a-side games. So if you have the space for it, that you can get everyone involved in the different games and vary it up then every so often. And again, we're looking at our spot and fix here, whereby we're going round and we're watching for the hurling hand staying at the top of that hurl, hands locked together when we're striking the ball, and players using left and right, so if they're allowed to pick it up and they're trying to strike it from their hand, that they're not always going to their strong side to try and hit it, that they're using their opposite side as well, whether that's their left or right side, that they're using both sides as they strike that ball. And again, it's just going around looking for the basics that we've been coaching 4 to 6 weeks. One of the great ones as well for this is allowing the kids themselves to come up with their rules for games, and this is something I do in the schools all the time. By week 6, you're encouraging the kids, you're asking them what they enjoyed, what games they enjoyed over the last 5 weeks, and the first question you're going to ask in every session you start is going to be, can we play a game? Can we play a game? It's the first question every child will always ask you at every session, whether that's in the club, in a school, in a nursery, wherever it is. They just want to play games, so we let them play games, and by week 6 we're rewarding them for what they've learned by letting them make up their own games. So they can come back with some daft ones obviously, but they can come back with some great ones as well, and you'd be amazed how quickly they can come up with their own rules. It's what they do in the playground every day of the week when they're in school. They come up with their own games, they come up with their own rules, and it works wonderfully in the playground. So why don't we try and adapt that for our training sessions as well? It gives us the opportunity to step back, maybe get some ideas even on games, maybe get some ideas on what the kids are enjoying, what they're really what's really helping them to challenge themselves, number one, but also to really have a lot of fun, which is the key part of any session that we do. And it also gives us the opportunity to spot and fix. So rather than being in on top of them and explaining rules to them the whole time, that we're letting them come up with the rules, we're letting them play the game, and we only intervene when we are needed to. So that's week 6. That's the very much the fun and playing the games, the key part of week 6, and that would be a 6-week program that I would do in the schools. Obviously some programs might go on longer. Week 8, by week 7, week 8, you're again going back on some of the skills that you've learned, trying to develop those skills a bit better, and whether you're going right back to the very basics of holding the hurl right, if that still isn't you're still not satisfied that every player, every boy and girl is holding that hurl right. You might need to keep revisiting that every week, and striking the ball when it comes to, you can never hit enough slitters, so that's something that needs to be done every single week. And Martin spoke about it in his presentation when we talked about the essentials of the game that have to be done every single week. Not only have they to be done every single week, they have to be done by kids. If kids want to be playing and getting full enjoyment from hurling and camogie, they have to be done at home all the time, and they will be done. If a kid has a hurl and a wall at home and some sort of ball they can hit against it, they'll do it because they love doing it, and there's a huge amount of fun from it. That fun will come from developing the skills though, and if they're struggling with the skills from the start, or they're struggling with holding the hurl, or the hurl is too big and they can't quite lift it comfortably, that's going to take away from the fun, and ultimately it's going to dissuade them from playing the game and playing on their own at home and mastering those essential skills. So that's where we're going to end off this presentation. Many thanks for your patience and your company over the past hour or so. Many thanks again to Martin Fogarty for his contribution. If anyone has any questions, there's a form attached on this video here that we'd love you to fill in with any questions. Martin is going to be back with me to answer those questions. We'll do that next Monday, so get your questions in via the form, and we'll go through all of them, and I do hope you can join us next Monday as we go through some of those.